Russia is currently going through the most critical and challenging periods in its history. Due to the war in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's country has entered a period of economic, military, and political collapse. The number of casualties in the Moscow army today was set at about 100,000 soldiers. The harsh winter conditions and the outstanding success of the Ukrainian warriors at the front are driving the Russian army to a great stalemate and despair. Today, the most heated region on the front has again been the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The multi-pronged attacks of the Russian occupation forces in Donetsk could not break through the defense of Ukraine. In the last 24 hours, the Ukrainian defense forces repulsed the attacks of the invaders near Stelmakivka, Chervonopolpivka, and Serebryanska in the Luhansk region, and Verkhnyo-Kakhamyanska, Pidhorodne, Bakhmut, Opytne, Kurdyumivka, Krasnohorivka, and Marinka in the Donetsk region. Today, President of Ukraine Zelensky made a surprise visit to Bakhmut, one of the biggest focal points of the war. He was with the brave soldiers throughout the day and renewed confidence and morale with them. On the other hand, different explosion reports are published every day in the Belgorod and Kursk provinces on the Russian border with Ukraine. Today, the destruction of some military targets in the Russian city of Belgorod has been reported, but the Russian administration in the region claims that the Ukrainian armed forces carried out the attacks. The severe conditions of the war affected both countries deeply, but the Russian Federation is about to get out of control. Mysterious fires, explosions, forced mobilization of minorities, public protests, riots, economic crisis in almost every region of the Russian Federation infuriate the Russian people and shake the Kremlin deeply. In addition, the heavy depressions caused by the Western and U.S. sanctions from the Russian Federation are making the Russian citizens more up against the Moscow regime. While the high tension of the war continues to escalate, the risky decisions taken by the Russian administration are bringing the country one step closer to darkness and impasse. While the situation in Russia was like this, the country organizations that provided support for Ukraine to regain its independence were gathered under a single roof for this purpose. Countries and alliance groups such as the USA, Western European countries, the EU, and NATO have always supported Ukraine's epic struggle against the invading troops, and they still do. The U.S. administration is leading the way in this regard. Washington has provided more than $20 billion in military and financial support to Ukraine so far. In addition, the Biden administration has taken dozens of economic and diplomatic sanctions against Russia. The last day, the U.S. Treasury Department announced that more than 40 people and 18 institutions connected with Russia's financial services sector were placed on the sanctions list, including Vladimir Putin and Rosbank, a Russian-based commercial bank owned by him. The statement noted that the sanctions further limited the ability of the Russian government to finance its brutal war against Ukraine. The harsh sanctions placed by the USA against Russia continue to set an example for all countries of the world. The Moscow administration, on the other hand, continues to seek solutions in order to get rid of the crisis period it's in, as Russia seeks ways to strengthen its finances amid the crippling Western sanctions imposed in response to President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. The Moscow administration is considering a return to cryptocurrency. The State Duma, the country's lower house, is expected to consider a bill this week that will pave the way for creating a local cryptocurrency market. Legislation of the Russian administration on this subject will legalize the mining of cryptocurrency and sale of the issued cryptocurrency from January 1, 2023. Among the authors of the legislation are Anatoly Aksakov, chairman of the Duma Committee on Financial Markets, and Anton Gorelkin, deputy chairman of the Information Policy, Information Technologies, and Communications Committee. As Russia was kicked out of the SWIFT global banking system, Western countries froze Russia's assets to some of its foreign currency reserves. The U.S. Treasury also announced that it would restrict investors from purchasing Russian debt. While the sanctions against Russia continued, Canada's striking step created an event on the world's agenda. About a surprise Russian oligarch, the Ottawa government took a shocking decision. Yesterday, the Canadian government announced that it will seize and continue the confiscation of assets owned by Roman Abramovich, a sanctioned Russian oligarch. According to Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, Ottawa will seize $26 million from Granite Capital Holdings Limited, a company owned by Abramovich, and file a confiscation lawsuit. This means that Minister Joly will now consider going to court to permanently transfer the asset to the Crown. The proceeds from this seizure of Abramovich's assets can be used for the reconstruction of Ukraine and compensation for the victims of the illegal and unjustified occupation of the Putin regime. Canada will continue to put pressure on the Russian regime and those who profit from Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. As the Ukrainians continue to fight valiantly to reclaim the land that is rightfully theirs, the Ottawa administration reiterated its commitment to continue standing by Ukraine no matter how long it takes. According to Canadian Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, Putin's oligarchs are complicit in Russia's illegal and barbaric invasion of Ukraine. About this, Freeland said, "Canada will not be a haven for their ill-gotten gains. Today's announcement demonstrates our determination to ensure that Russia's elites pay the price for their support of Putin's brutal regime. It is perfectly fair and appropriate to use Russian assets to help Ukraine rebuild." Meanwhile, Canada is using its new powers for the first time, allowing it to monitor the government's seizure of assets belonging to sanctioned individuals. Following the striking sanction decision, the Canadian government emphasized its strong commitment to Ukraine, its restructuring, and that it is the first G7 country to implement such measures, holding accountable those who profit from and support the Putin regime. The European Union has also put the issue of sanctions against Russia back on its agenda after the Canadian government's seizure of assets against Roman Abramovich. The member states of the European Union reached a consensus on the implementation of the 9th package of sanctions against Russia. In the statement shared on the official social media account of the EU term President Czechia, it was stated that the ambassadors agreed in principle on a package of sanctions against Russia as part of the EU's continued support to Ukraine. It was stated that the approval process of the new sanctions package will be completed with a written procedure today. The content of the sanctions package has not been shared with the public yet. The 9th sanctions package proposal, prepared by the EU Commission last week, included the addition of approximately 200 people and organizations to the sanctions list, including some names from the Russian armed forces, defense industry companies, members of the State Duma and the Federation Council, ministers, governors, political parties, and others. In the EU sanctions page, it was proposed to impose sanctions on 3 more Russian banks, including the ban on transactions with the Russian Regional Development Bank in order to reduce Moscow's revenues, in order to impose restrictions on the export of dual-use products and to prevent Moscow's access to all kinds of unmanned aerial vehicles. It was proposed to ban the direct export of UAV engines to Russia and export to third countries such as Iran that can supply UAVs to Putin's army. It was also proposed to ban new mining investments in Russia. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, on the other hand, stated that the agreement of the European Union member countries on the 9th sanctions package against Russia is an indicator of unity, and declared that the 9th individual and economic sanctions package adopted is another important step towards weakening Russia's power. Speaking to reporters in Brussels, Morawiecki said that until a few days ago there was uncertainty about this sanctions package, but now everything is clear. Stating that they have reached the agreed point in the sanctions against Russia, Morawiecki said, "These are sanctions that show once again that we are reliable. We have maintained unity among member states. Russia is playing to the division within the EU and we did not allow it." In addition, emphasizing that Poland and Lithuania made proposals for the sanctions against Russia to be addressed in a 12-month cycle, Morawiecki said, "Our agreement in this sanctions package is one of the most important indicators that our union will stand by Ukraine. The 9th package of individual and economic sanctions adopted is a critical step towards weakening Russia's power. In addition, we have imposed a ban on investment in the mining sector, which has not existed in Russia until now. This is a very important printing method. We have succeeded in maintaining the belief that unity, solidarity, and peace must be victorious for Ukraine and Europe. We will see together how long Vladimir Putin and his army will withstand this power, while the whole world has stood by Ukraine as one heart against Russia's aggressive policies. We hope that the aid to be sent to the Kyiv army this winter will contribute to the change of some balances in the war and the return of Ukraine to its old free days."